Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Build America, the national podcast that is capturing and sharing the very heartbeat of construction and construction technology. And I'm excited about today's episode. I'm your host, Kerry Smith Buck, owner of Construction News and Review magazine. And this is just a treat. We have a special gifted technology forward person with us today from Guarantee Electrical Company, and his name is Lutalo Webb or Lou Webb. And Lou is Vice President of Data and Technology at Guarantee Electrical Company. And Lou, we're just excited to have you with us today. Thank you.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much. That was a great intro too, Kerry. Thank you.
Oh, good. Thanks. I wasn't sure in the middle if you like to go by Lou or Lutalo, so I wanted to throw them both out there.
Both of them are good. Most people say Lutalo wrong, so that's why I go with Lou. You actually said both correctly, so you got freedom. You could choose either one.
Oh my gosh, thanks. Good thing when you drink enough coffee on a Monday, everything eventually works out. Well, we're glad that you joined us today. And as I know we were talking about before we got on the air, that I feel like your role, Lou, at Guarantee Electrical is unique because most people maybe hear the title VP of Data and Technology and they think, as I did initially, that you're going to talk about different construction platforms and technology, and you're welcome to. But we need to let our listeners and viewers know that really your role is just the whole piece that comes before that with is just evaluating the efficiency and buy-in on the front end regarding the technology solution, whatever it is. Would that be an accurate statement as to what your role is?
Yes, at least with current scope and kind of how we have this phased out. So I look at business through four lenses, let's say people, processes, policy, and I'm going to intentionally make this my pinky finger, tools. So the data and technology piece of this is the tool, but I'm way more focused on the people, the policies, and the processes that tool is supposed to be supporting.
Oh, what a great way to describe that. I appreciate you breaking it into four bins for us. So I've heard a lot of people say, more people than not, I'm sure you have as well. People say that the construction industry is not, surprise, known for being an early adopter when it comes to new technology. And I wonder if that's a fair statement, Lou, or if that's just maybe 5, 10 years ago, that was a fair statement. What do you think?
I think it's a fair statement. Even if we look at the data says that construction is one of the few industries where productivity is diminished over the last 10 years or 20 years. Now we're in a risk adverse industry. So I'm not surprised by that. A lot of us are playing a very low margin game, and we've seen company after the company, one project can take you down. So I'm not necessarily surprised that we've been risk adverse. I think the surprise with me is that we've been risk averse, but now we've seen other industries implement solutions successfully. Let's start grabbing some of these ideas and trying to apply them. I'm fine with us not being the first one over the hill, but at this point, we're not even the 10th person over the hill. I think there's some opportunity in trying some things out at this point.
Oh, what a great way said. Because that's what I was just thinking for a long time, because it's so risk adverse, the industry just didn't take those risks. And now all of a sudden we see companies doing that. And it makes a lot of sense to me that you wouldn't want to be the first one because you can learn from other people's mistakes or challenges.
Yeah. So I think how this is phased out is that you had people maybe in a tech industry be the first one to try something out, right? And then eventually you did get some early adopters in construction. Usually larger companies, GCs, they might have a budget that can lend itself to some R&D or trying out some ideas. And then you got this phase of, okay, GCs did this with big dollars. What are some of the larger specialty contractors? They'll take some bits and pieces from those. And then we finally funnel down to probably kind of where a lot of places are. Hey, we've seen it done a little bit, even in electrical space for us. How can we mimic and start implementing this on our end? But I think it's phased this way down, so to speak.
That makes a lot of sense. I know even in our industry, I'd rather, by default, we're taking a lot of risks and on the curve because of the nature of what publishing and newspapers are. We have to remain vibrant, but I could certainly understand that, like you said, in an industry, the margins are just very slim and you've got to be careful. I would think you've got to be careful too, not only adopting the technology, but like the first project that you use it on. I can't imagine for that project manager and superintendent what that learning curve and that practical manifestation of risk is.
Yeah, picking the right person, picking the right project, making sure that You're giving yourself some opportunity to learn still, right? Safe failure is important there. I think there's a lot of factors in place, and I could get why companies have strayed away from it even because yeah, it's a low margin industry.
Definitely, definitely. So really and correct me if I don't have this right, but part of your role is really to ascertain or get a pulse for the company-wide buy-in of new technology, or where does maybe I should back up a step and ask you, Lou, where does the buy-in start? With whom does it start? Is it
Starts
like
with
the
leadership.
C-suite or where is it? Okay.
Starts with leadership for sure. You got to have leadership buy-in that will drive a lot of change on your organization if leadership is bought in. The other thing is you want to make sure the users that it's going to end up touching has some say. If with my 6-year-old, if I just get him chicken nuggets, he might say, "Man, I wanted cheese pizza today. I wanted pepperoni pizza." Truth is, he probably was going to pick chicken nuggets anyway. I just have to give him a voice to vocalize that. And now he feels like he's a part of the process. Now, when they come home, he's the first one to dip it in the barbecue sauce. So I think the same thing. You want to get those people to be involved so that they feel like they're a part of the solution and not just being dictated, hey, this is what you're going to do now, when they're the persons that are actually doing the work anyway.
What a great analogy. And it's interesting, like you said, you probably knew what he was going to choose anyway, but you gave him a voice. And that must be way more complicated, though, with in the application in which you're working, because I wonder if people are wowed by the bells and whistles and they have to look at why they'd adopt it or what it's replacing, or tell me a little bit about how not to
No,
wow people too much with the it seems really cool kind of aspect.
you got it. Nail on the head of the, or what is it? Hammer on
I
the nail,
think so.
whatever the French is there. I would say that there's a few parts to this. One would be, yes, people are drawn to the shiny whatever trinket. They also, America is very good at selling things. We're very good at marketing. Kudos to all the salespeople out there in tech. You're doing a great job as far as scheduling demos and presenting yourself as the answer to all of our problems. That is where I would have the biggest hurdle though with that is that now, hey, they recognize maybe there is some problem. They recognize they also maybe have pinpointed the solution to this. But taking that excitement, because you have some excitement, you got some energy with that. I don't want the person to lose that excitement because that could turn into momentum. But how do I get them? How can I communicate the value of one, first understanding the problem? Two, are there potentially other solutions out there outside of what she just came across? Because 99% of the time they came across it from either Google search or someone reaching out to them. It's not, I wouldn't say due diligence on research so much. And then the third piece is really leaning into, do we understand the problem? Do we understand what success looks like when solving this? Understanding your metric, I call it a metric for success, I would say is one of the critical pieces to this. Because if you can't define what success looks like, then often you end up in this weird cycle of, I think it's working, maybe it's working, some different experience from different people, no formal way of doing lessons learned or continuous improvement. We should accept that we're not going to get this right first across
Okay.
the board. I don't care what you're talking about. You're not going to get it right the first time unless you're extremely lucky. So it's how do we build in processes so that we can continually improve? We're constantly getting feedback from our users, some cadence or frequency to that makes sense, and just continually to iterate. And another thing is you don't want to have a dependency on one product even so much. So when you're thinking about something, always think through the lens of your business, your culture, your people. Because what you might realize is that from 2022 to 2025, you had the best product. But in 2026, something else really met your needs a lot more. Can you make that shift? And has the focus been on what this tool, how it was supporting our people, our processes, our policies? Or did it become your people, your policies, and your processes started supporting the tool?
Okay. Wow, say that one more time because I wanna digest that about
Okay.
in the egg kind of scenario.
Yeah. So my focus is first people, processes, policy, and then figuring out tools that can support them. I think often we work the opposite way. We put the tool first and then we build, hey, we're going to make sure our people can work in this box. We're going to change our policies and processes to fit this software or this tool. And that's where you're going to hit a lot of roadblocks and hurdles usually.
Oh, I bet. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking it's not inexpensive to buy the technology, but I bet it's even more expensive, the people time. You're taking people away from something else they're doing to learn this. So it better be what you need. Can you talk a little about the people costs of it, however you would define those?
Let's call them investments, not costs so much.
Okay.
People
Stand
investment.
corrected.
You need to think about this through the lens of the user. So thinking about your training that you're going to have, hey, you're probably going to have some session where they come into a room or look on a screen and you're going to teach them how to use it. Okay, after that hour or 2 hours or however long it was, and they forgot half of what you said, where do they go now to see that information? Because I don't know if when you live in Zoom, you can
Yeah.
probably move around this easily now. You've used this so many times. Now think about the first time when COVID hit maybe and you had to use this and you're like, what's this button? What's this? And
Yeah.
then somebody's trying to teach you about a fancy feature to change your background. You're trying to figure out how to turn on your camera first or how to mute.
Right.
So giving people space even to consume and absorb at a rate that makes sense is something you want to think about there. Leaning into the experience of your end user is what I would push companies to do though. Making sure you're setting them up for success and you're even providing, I would say, some safe space for them to fail if necessary. But
Sure.
documentation, obviously training, you want to do some type of check-ins, especially that first year. Ideally, you would also want to have a proof of concept or some prototype before doing some kind of large scale rollout. So how do you identify those persons? How do you build out the capacity that they might need over this many months? And sometimes when we look at this, what you'll hear is, hey, Marjorie, we're thinking about getting a new software. You mind being a part of the team? Yeah, that sounds great. It's going to affect me, blah, 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 blah. In no time was it said, hey, the expectation for this is I'm going to need about 4 hours a week from you testing stuff. You just talk about this big idea and you don't get into the specifics of what that entails for their person. I think the clearer you are on that, the more likely you're actually not only get buy-in, but get the right buy-in, because they might be excited, but if they only have 1 hour of free time, you're not gonna get the input and value that you need.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent point. Without having to talk to anything that's proprietary to Guarantee Electrical, is there a way that you could maybe give us kind of an example on whatever level of how Guarantee took something, decided to go for it, and embodied those different steps? However you would want to illustrate it as an example, we'd love to hear about that.
So in that sense, I'm a stickler for frameworks and methodologies. I believe that there are way smarter people on this planet and they've existed for decades and decades. And I'm grateful for them iterating on different ideas so that I don't have to come up with anything new. I'm not reinventing the wheel. So with that, I like to follow BABOK is what it's called, Business Analyst Book of Knowledge. And it lays out a very pretty streamlined framework on how to go about understanding something is the big thing I would say it is. Understanding it's business analyst, but really these are things you can apply to life even. So
Okay.
with that, the first step in this is just understanding where you are. So you're gonna do some type of current state analysis is the first
Okay.
step to it. So let's look at this from the lens of, let's say I want to get my leaders dashboards and we have nothing in place. Step one is, all right, what systems are in place? And perhaps we realize we got accounting information, we got some engineering data, we got something over in pre-construction as far as our estimating goes, right? So we kind of lay out what all exists out here. Then I want to start defining the problem somewhere. What are we trying to solve? Why are we even talking right now? And perhaps they say, hey, I need to more quickly be able to see A, B, and C before I make decisions. Okay, let's build out what the requirements might look like for that. Do you need to access on a phone or a laptop? How responsive do you need this to be? Are you worried about perhaps there being some training documentation already in this system that we don't have to build out our own? You go down that list, and if I talk to my person in IT, he's going to say they need to have single sign-on. That's important for us, so they don't have another password to memorize. So you build out this list of requirements, and then you're going to prioritize them. So now we have an understanding of where we are. We have an understanding of what we need, what we feel like we need moving forward. Let's define what success might look like now. Okay, we think this is going to solve this problem. This is how we're going to measure this in 9 months or 12 months or whatever. And some people might say you might not really want to look at that ROI for 3 years to be legitimate because you're going to put a lot of resources in probably that first year. Okay, so we got understand where we are, understand what we need, understand if getting what we need, what success would look like for it. Now let's start looking at products. Now let's start researching vendors and setting up. And now when I set up, it's not the salesperson telling me, hey, let's set up a demo on Tuesday. It's me asking, and guess what I'm going to send them before that demo, my requirements. So they can
Sure.
respond to this in writing. They understand what our priorities are. I'm setting them up for success too. So when they present, they understand exactly what our needs are and what to speak to. And then if they can't hit it all, they should be giving us some documentation that responded to each of our requirements and why their system meets our needs.
Wow.
Now we went through that. Now let's figure out which platform makes sense. And it's going to be an internal meeting with a group. We're going to sit through all of this. Let's rate. We have a way to grade these vendors now. So let's let some of this data make some decisions instead of our gut or our heart. We might still have our gut or heart, but it's an additional data point we got now of us grading these on a scale 1 to 5 in these different categories. Get a short list, right? We finally got that shortlisted. We got it maybe down to 2 things. Perhaps we bring in leadership now to look at these 2 that we got it shortlisted to because they probably don't want to sit in on the 10 different demos you did in the first place. Now we get their buy-in. Cool, we select one. And now you got the process of actually thinking through how you're going to implement and who's going to be a part of it and who's going to, is the documentation sufficient or did you choose to do it internally? So that's just getting up to the point of choosing a software. Then you have the work of, all right, how do we support and maintain and implement this piece of software? And then at what cadence do we circle back to say, yes, it's been a success, or no, this was a poor investment and this is what we learned from this investment. And this is why it didn't work for us.
Sure.
I'm skipping a lot of steps that happen after selecting the software, but I also don't want to talk for 3 hours about it.
Yeah, no, we'd have to cut you off in a couple of minutes. But no, that's so important. And I'm sure that you've been a part of, or maybe organizations are looking from the outside in, Lou, where this didn't happen. And there's probably nothing worse than a big expenditure, a lack of adoption. And the biggest, saddest part would be not achieving anything that people expected.
Yeah, which happens more than you think. It's about the organization's willingness to, one, put their ego to the side and accept that, hey, we fell short. Let's look at why we fell short. How can we make sure we don't, if we fall short, we don't fall short the same way next time? You might mess up again, but at least try not to make it the same way and finding ways to iterate on ideas. This is all continuous improvement is what all this is about. Getting people to enjoy the process, the journey, and not get so tied to results and a finish line, which is tough because we're in a margin-driven industry that is very much about what's the dollar say at the end of this. So it's somewhat of a shift there. We still have a job to do. We still have work to perform in a safe way, in an efficient way, in a way that we told our clients that we would deliver. But on the flip side of that, can we push this culture of continuously improving, thinking about data-driven decisions, thinking about our people first, how different people might interpret things. There's a lot of things at play. I don't necessarily envy C-suite right now. Like,
Oh,
I'm sure a lot of tasks.
no, exactly. Gosh, I could talk to and learn from you all day. Believe it or not, we already sped through the time.
Are you kidding me? Are we at 20 minutes?
No, we're at like 22 minutes.
Oh,
Not to
I'm
be
sorry.
too literal. No, that's perfect because I learned a ton and I know that our listeners did as well. So we must have you back on for a part 2 at some time soon.
I would love that.
And we've been listening to Lutalo Webb, or Lou Webb, Vice President of Data and Technology at Guarantee Electrical Company. And we're just really excited to learn from you today. I hope you do come back and see us again.
I will definitely be back. I will try to keep it down to 20 minutes next time. But thank you so much for having me. And thank you for the work you do, Kerry, as far as sharing this information, promoting the sharing of resources within this industry. Because as we talked about in the beginning, it's important. We are a little bit behind the curve, but I'm sure if we work together, we can work ourselves up, work our ways up.
Exactly. No, thank you for your kind words and happy to have you here today. So everybody tune in again. And this was Lou Webb with Guarantee Electrical Company.